right, so I passed out two things to you. One of them was the Maya Hotkeys sheet, so keep this handy. All of these things you use plus a lot more. That's why there's extra space to kind of write in some extra hotkeys as we go. The other one is a little cheat sheet. That way you know how to name things and keep yourself organized. The first thing we're going to do today is we're going to go to our P drive and we're going to set up Maya to start using it. On these computers, the C drives and the desktops are no write areas. So don't write anything to them. You can, but when the computer reboots or crashes, everything goes away. Okay, so don't save anything to either of those areas. The P drive is open though. So go to your P drive and you're going to make a folder in there. And obviously you guys are on your laptop, so you just wherever you can put your stuff if you're working off your laptops. So call it your last name underscore 2520 underscore F18. If you have multiple classes, you may want to make a main folder and then put these folders inside it. That way you have, all my Sarcona folders are bunched together, however you want to do it. Inside that folder, we will not be creating any folders yet, okay? Maya is unique in how it organizes stuff because inside the software we can tell it create this folder and it'll organize this stuff for us, okay? We just have to populate the stuff into the right folders. So we'll leave that. Oops. All right, go back to your P drive on your computers or your, Jasmine, you'll go to your documents just so you can see where this is at too, okay? So in your P drive, there should be a folder that says Maya. It may exist, it may not exist. Do you guys see it? Yep. Okay. So that is all your Maya preferences. So one of the cool things about Maya is every time you go in there, you make a hotkey, you create shelf items, which you'll see, all this stuff, it saves it into this folder. So typically what people do in industry is they'll take this Maya folder and they'll travel with it. That way anywhere I go, I drop this folder, I have my preferences, okay? That's good for you because you can do that, but what sucks is that next hour when another Maya class comes in, they're going to override your preferences and do their own stuff. So we want to start off with a fresh slate. So I'm going to make sure that my Maya is closed. And then I'm going to go into the Maya folder and I'm going to delete the 2018 folder if it exists. Okay? Mm-hmm. So on those folders, can you rename them without screwing up Maya? You can. You can rename them, you can delete them, any of those, and Maya will just regenerate them. Correct. 2018 is the preferences for 2018. When you install 2019, 2019 folder will be there. Or if there's a service pack or something, it'll be 2018.5 or whatever. That's why I have this one as 2018.3. That's my actual preferences that I don't get screwed up after I delete them all the time. Okay, so now we can open up Maya. Mm-hmm. You don't need to. Because we're going to work in 2018, it'll just populate that one. The only thing you're going to get maybe is when you boot it up, it'll say, do you want to copy 2015's? Just say create default. Now every time you come in, that 2018 folder, you don't know if that's yours or somebody else's. You want to delete it and restore that with your copy that you're going to back up at the end of each day. Okay, so every time you make changes throughout the day, at the end of the day, you'll take the 2018 folder with you. When you come in the next time, put the 2018 folder back. That way you're moving with your preferences, okay? All three of you are in the next class too, right? Yeah. Okay, so realistically, we're the only ones using Maya. So nobody should be screwing with yours. But just to be safe, okay? Cool. All right, so there is our, hey. Okay, so this is what Maya looks like when you first open it up. Every time, unless you change options, you'll get this thing that says what's new, highlights, here's some things you can click on, blah, blah, blah. As new people, this doesn't matter to you because it's new, so pretty much everything is new to you. So you could turn that off if you want, and then the little green things will go away, or you can leave it on. I'm going to turn mine off because I don't want this pop-up showing every time I start Maya. Under the help files, there are 1-minute startup movies. So there is like, oh, I forgot how to move, rotate, scale, orbit around things. You can click that and get to it too. There's also a learning channel. There's some tutorials. A whole bunch of stuff is in the help file. So like most programs, you may never visit the help. It's actually very helpful inside of Maya. The interface can be overwhelming. So we have this shelf area here. The shelf is basically a collection of things that you constantly use. So Cinema has like buttons up there, but it's not the same kind of thing, okay? These are basically like, I'm constantly going to this menu button. Instead of me having to constantly go to it, I can just make it right there and then access it very easily, okay? Maya allows you to literally customize every single thing that you see. I'm going to scare you for a second. Make sure your mouse is like in the middle of the screen and then hold down the space bar. Okay, so this thing here, this is called the hot box. And this is every menu inside of Maya. And this thing here can also be customized. All right, so the shelf is a great way to store your stuff. Everything can be customized. Let's break it down into the main areas here. So up at the very top is the menu bar. You're familiar with that because typically every program you've ever used has a menu bar. File, edit, create, and so on. All that stuff already exists in every other program. The difference you'll find here is that this is one of Maya's menu bars. If you go to where it says modeling and you switch that from modeling to rigging, that will change that menu bar on the top. If you change it from rigging to animation, that will change that menu bar on top. So all of these things here, you can actually change what those menus say on top. And if you look at that bottom list, it says customize. Again, you can kind of figure out or make your own and have your own custom menu bar at the very top of it. Okay? It's really helpful because they want you to be able to work as fast as possible. And so all the stuff that they do here, or they did for the interface, is built to make it possible for you to just like work as quickly as possible. For instance, control spacebar, you don't have to hit this. It gets rid of everything, and so you're left with just the shell. That way you have a bigger workspace and you can really focus on just modeling because you may not need everything. Okay, lots of stuff in here. You can make your own shelf items, you can delete things, you can make your own scripts. If you find you're constantly like, every 2 minutes I'm going to this menu, this menu, this menu, and then that menu, you can actually take those 4 or 5 menu items and put them into a shelf item, and you click it and it'll automatically run through all 4 or 5 of those things. Okay, it's pretty awesome. More hotkeys here, or not hotkeys, but buttons up here. This over here is your main tools. Just like every software, get used to using the hotkeys. You'll find it a tremendous help. Photoshop, a lot of times, you know, you hold the control, drag something over, you paint, you know, it's not as fast between your switching of tools. Here, you're constantly moving between move, rotate, and scale, spinning the camera around, zooming in and out, whatever, okay? So these are here, but hardly ever will you see me use them. Down here are different layouts. So right now we have just the one perspective view. If we click that one, we have 4 perspective front, side, and top. This is 2 views split, and then this is the outliner, front, and perspective. In Cinema, on the top right, that's where you saw all of your items listed. That's what the outliner would do, is it would show you all the items you have in your scene. Unlike Cinema, we don't really do a whole lot in the outliner. In Cinema, you would have all those flags that would go next to it. We don't do that. And the outliner is simply a way for us to organize stuff. Everything else happens in another window, which you'll see, okay? In Cinema, you were able to middle click, pop in and out of your views. Maya, you just tap the space bar. So if you have it set up to 4 view, you can just tap the space bar with your mouse over any one and get into that window, okay? Oops, come on. Timelines on the bottom, very similar to Cinema's. This is a scripting area, so not that it matters, but you could type scripts and then it'll make stuff. One of the powerful things about Maya, one of the reasons that people use Maya more than most other 3D softwares is because of its scripting abilities. Timeline slider, yes. Over here are layers. They work better than Cinema's. And I'm going to compare it a lot to Cinema just so you have kind of point of reference. In Cinema, you would make an object, you put it on a layer, and then you put an object in the group, and then that group, the object wouldn't be on the same layer, right? It's really stupid. In Maya, if you have a group, that could be on this layer, and then you could have sub-items be on sub-layers, okay? So it's really nice how they have their stuff organized. Maya also has what are called animation layers. So if I had an object moving just like across the screen, that could be one layer. Another layer of it could be it bouncing. Another layer of it could be it squashing. And so in the animation layers, you can actually see and play with all these different kind of stackable things. And if you're just trying to focus on one thing, you could do that. I hardly ever use animation layers, but I wanted you to just know that that's what that is. This over here is where you're going to change some properties. So let's create an object. You can click it from the shelf here. So polygon modeling, there's several items you can create. You can go to create polygons and make something here. Or you can use the hotbox and go to create polygon and then pick something. Okay, so I made a sphere. I can frame it by hitting F. That will zoom me in. That's on your hotkey sheet. The orbital tools are pretty similar to Cinema's. Alt, left mouse button is orbiting around. Middle is moving. And then right is zooming in and out. Okay. It will take you, obviously, a little bit to acclimate if you haven't touched it in a semester or the summer. But you'll pick it up really quick. Just like Cinema's, you'll find that, once you get past these stupid hurdles of these basic hotkeys, you actually get a pretty quick workflow. On the right side of the screen, once we created that object, we have what's called the channel box. The channel box lists the translates, rotates, and scales for that object. It also lists some other stuff here this is for rendering. And then way on the bottom of it, you'll see it says, for me, polysphere. If you made a cube, it would say polycube. If you made a torus, it would say polytorus. Okay? In Cinema, you would have the area where you could change some of the properties of it, some of the parameters, the scale, the rotation, or the divisions, all that. That's what this is. Okay? So here's the radius. I can make the radius bigger or smaller. Now the way that I do that in here, there's two ways. One, all of these, if you see where my mouse is at right now, this is a slider. So all of this is a slider on the side. If I click on the name and then I come out here in the viewport and middle click and drag, that's a virtual slider. Typically I go that route. This gives me a little bit more refinement. You can see how this is like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. If I click and drag in the channel box, this jumps 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I get a little bit more refinement when I just click on the word and then middle click and drag here. Same thing with subdivisions. Same thing with subdivisions. Okay, so again, these things will come to you the more you're in the software, the more you play with it. It will take some time just to get used to kind of the flow of how Maya likes to work. Some things are going to be very intuitive. Some things just take a minute. Once you get it, though, you will not want to go to any other interface. Cool. So I can click on that and change my subdivisions. Wonderful. Moving in Maya, this is what's really going to screw you up because it screws me up. W is the move tool. E is rotate. And R is scale. Yes. The only reason they did that, well, the only reason they have it there is because they're right next to each other, and I'm assuming you don't use scale as much as you would use rotate, so they put them next to each other. I don't know. So that will screw you up. It screws me up, especially since before this class I have Cinema and then I have Maya, so just get used to that, okay? It works the same way. You have these little plane pieces. This changes the plane that it's moving on. You have the arrows. Always move it with the arrows. Never just grab the item and move it like this. because that way you're kind of moving it in all three directions. You don't want to do that. If I want this to sit on the floor, I'll rotate and I'll put it right on the floor. Okay. Rotate the item just in one direction here, just in one direction there. Okay. Never in all directions because these things go crazy. Scaling, this is pretty much however you want to do this. This doesn't matter. Okay. If you want uniform, you grab the middle. If you don't want a uniform, then you can grab the other sides. But don't try to do it uniform by grabbing each one individually, which some people do. If I go too fast, let me know. We already have 3D, so some of this is kind of review, but some of it's going to be more familiar, some of it's not. All right, all the stuff over here is channel box stuff. It's basically just like the top 10 list of things that you may want to edit for this object. That's all that is. If we hit Control A, this brings up the attribute editor. This is literally everything about that item, okay? So in Cinema, you would have the flags that you would add to it. So if you wanted like a compositing tag so it didn't have shadows, you would add a compositing tag to it in Cinema. Then you could say, this item doesn't emit shadows, and then that item would be shadowless, okay? Did you guys do that before in Cinema? No? Okay. That's something you can do. If I have a light shining on an object and I don't want this object to have a shadow, I can say don't have a shadow by adding a tag to it. In Maya, all of that stuff is right here. If I go to Render Stats, Cast Shadow is right there. Even Receive Shadow is right there. Okay, so I can turn those things off. The reason you'd want to do that is sometimes when you render different layers and different passes, you would render out basically like your ground with just the shadows, and then you may render out your objects with no shadows, and so on. Cool. So that's the attribute editor. Several tabs. This will get confusing. Maya saves every single thing you do. Okay, so when you do an extrude in Cinema, you have basically that time that you're playing with the extrude to do anything with it. Once you're done and you've moved on, you can't adjust that extrude anymore. In Maya, it saves that extrude, okay? Also in Maya, there's no like C key that lets you edit stuff. So this object basically is, here's the radius of it. I can use the sliders and the divisions. If I wanted to extrude this, I would right click, go to face, grab some faces, and then if I just switch to my, if I hold shift, that's what lets me do it, and then I can extrude this out. Okay. Now even when I switch back to my main mode, this is object mode, there's that extrude. So I still have the ability to go back into that and tweak the settings. Cinema is for motion graphics. Okay, so and a lot of it depends on how you work, right? So I'm more comfortable modeling in Maya. So if I'm going to model like an airplane or something, I may model it in Maya, then bring it into Cinema to do motion graphics for it. Okay? Some people are just native Cinema people, they're used to it. It does suck. It's horrible. Maya modeling is not horrible. It's wonderful.
Where's the extrude option again?
If you right click and hold, you go to faces, and then you can pick on some faces. All you have to do is hold shift and go to one of the arrows and just drag. And that's a newer thing. I don't think that was in 2017 or maybe 16, but it is there now. There's other tools you'll see, but that's it. Okay. But all of these things, and this is one of the problems that some people will have with Maya, is that it saves all of these things. So every time I do an extrude, it saves it to the item. Every time I do a bevel, it saves it. Every time I do an edge loop, it saves it. Okay? The issue comes in, if we're using Maya 2018 here, you go home and you're using 2015, right? Even though extrude and bevel and all these things are still there, that version interprets it different, and you basically get this garbled mess of stuff, okay? So there's other things we can do, but that's the gist of it. All right, I'm going to delete my sphere and just make another sphere. There we go. Okay. So everything will be up there. You'll have a tab for all of those things. The material for each item is right there. So if I go to this item, here's the Lambert 1, there's the material. Make a note for yourself, never touch Lambert 1, okay? Lambert 1 is the default, we don't want to screw with this. If we do, and I'll just put a checkerboard on this so you can see it, any new item I create will have that default material on there. And that can be pretty annoying if I start creating stuff and I don't mean for that to happen. Okay, so don't play with Lambert 1. We would create a new material, assign that to our item, and then do whatever we want to that one. Okay. Cool. All right. Before we get too in-depth in here, let's create some settings. Okay. Maya, like I said, it's big on customizing, so we want to customize this a lot. We're going to go to the shelf where it says custom. And we're going to add our own name to this. So I'm going to go to the little gear on I click custom first. Then go to the gear and say shelf editor. And then I'm going to rename this with my last name. And I'm just putting 2520 so I remember which class this is for. You click on the little gear and then say shelf editor. If you download plugins, some of the plugins will automatically go to a shelf. So I downloaded Sketchfab. If you're not familiar with what Sketchfab is, it allows you to upload your 3D models to a website, kind of like Vimeo or YouTube or whatever, but it allows you to do this. So if you're trying to show off, here's a model that I did, instead of making a video of it, or instead of making just a still image, you can make a little animation that's 3D that you upload, and then whoever's looking at it can actually look at your model. And what's neat about this, if I go maybe here, oh, that's just buying it. I want to buy it. I want to preview it. Explore, architecture, sure. See that one. There we go. Okay, so I can spin around this thing. There's a model of some building. It's still loading, it looks like. Yep, there it goes. Over here under Model Inspector, they can also see like what it looks like with no post-processing or final render. So it's a little bit crisper with that final render. I can look at the base color. Doesn't really do anything. I can look at the matte cap, I can look at the wireframe for it, I can look at the vertex normals, I can look at the UV map, I can change the color of the wireframe. So not only does this give someone looking at your model an ability to obviously see the model, they can interact with it as well. What do I still have on? Wireframe? There we go. And they can really get like close to it so they can see the detail in it, which if you just have a still, you might be kind of far away and not really be able to show off all the detail there. So this Sketchfab that I have here, that's a plugin. I grab my model, textured, hit the button, it uploads it to my Sketchfab account, and then I can show off my model that way. Okay, very cool thing to be able to do. Cool, so there's my Sarcona 2520. I'm just gonna hit Save All Shelves. And now I'm gonna add stuff to the shelf. These things that we're adding are typically the things that I use on a daily basis every single time I'm inside Maya, okay? And not just like once in a while, but literally all the time, okay? The way we add stuff to our shelf is you hold Control-Shift, and then you go find any menu item. So hold Control-Shift, go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now don't do it multiple times. Click off after you've done that and see if it's in your shelf. Nothing magical happens, like nothing like pops up and says it's in your shelf. It's just in there, okay? Normally what happens is people go there and they're expecting something to happen. They click it 15 times and then they have 15 delete histories in their shelf. and then you have to right click and delete each one. Okay, everyone has delete history? Okay, hold Control Shift, go to Edit, delete by type, and then history. And then just either let go of the mouse button on it or click on it. Yeah, yeah, whichever shelf item you're on, that's when it adds it to. Yeah, I like to have kind of customize it for what I'm doing. So some people are doing animation. There may be 10 tools you want to use for animation. You would have your own animation shelf. You're modeling, you have a modeling shelf, and so on. Okay. And then click whatever. Yep, right click and delete, or you could even edit it. So if you wanted something to happen or you wanted options, you could add those in there. All right, so we're going to hold Control Shift again, and then go to Modify Center Pivot. Okay, and again, nothing pops up saying it did it, it just does it. So delete history, center pivot, these are two things that you'll pretty much do anytime you're modeling. A lot of times you'll build something and all that extruding, beveling, splitting, blah, 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 all that stuff will add up on your model. When you delete history, that gets rid of all that and basically like bakes it down. So that's basically like the C key inside of Cinema. It would just like eliminate all the junk, just give you the raw data. The center pivot, obviously it just centers that pivot point, okay? Control Shift still, we'll go to Window Outliner. And we'll also go to the Node Editor. We may use that. We're not going to click on this, but I just want to point it out right now. You see where it says Play Blast, and there's a little box there? Those are options for that tool. So play blasting is basically like a preview of your animation. So if we wanted to see what this would look like in real time, we can click the box, change some settings, and hit go, and it'll cache out our frames and then give us a real-time playback. Okay? The animation class will be doing that. Still holding Control Shift, we'll go to the animation editors and we'll add the graph editor and the dope sheet. You can also, if you want to, go to the modeling editors and add the modeling toolkit. I'm old school, like I started off in Maya 3, so this is like new. It's been out for several versions. I haven't gotten accustomed to it. I like just going in there because I know all my hotkeys and using it. If you watch a video and you see someone doing that, you may be ripe enough to like just pick this up and go with it, and that may be your tool of choice to use. Basically, a lot of the tools you'll use in Maya will be over there. Okay, so as you're working with something, it'll say, oh, you have a mesh selected. Do you want to smooth it? Do you want to separate it? Do you want to do a boolean? Do you want to bevel? Do you want to extrude? Blah, blah, blah. So it automatically kind of picks up what you have selected and uses that. I don't want to use that, so I'm not going to. You can. What else do we want? Okay, still Control Shift. Under UV, UV Editor. So you will find the UV editor in Maya is 50 times better than the one in Cinema. You can actually lay out UVs and lock them in and then use them throughout other programs. That should be good there. Do we need anything else? I think that should be good for now. Let me just double check. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, yep, a couple more. Control Shift, Freeze Transform. Yep, sorry, freeze transformations. What this does is when I take an item and I move it and rotate it and scale it, let's say that that's the shape I want that item to be. Like, I want this to be my zeroed out version of that shape. If I hit freeze transformations, it basically bakes all that information into it. So now that's zeroed out, okay? Meaning that all these are zeroed. For this, I have no reason to do it. Also keep in mind the projector is squishing my image vertically, so I actually have a sphere that looks like it's oblong. Oops, there we go. That's a sphere. It didn't look like it up there. Okay, so let's save that. So I'm going to go to File, and hit Save Preferences. Where'd you go? Save Preferences. There it is. Okay. So what that does when we save our preferences, it takes this information and actually writes it into that Maya 2018 folder. That way we have it in there. If Maya were to have crashed, we would have lost that information. We have to redo it. Cool. So now we're going to go to the little running guy with the gear. He's on the far right side. And these are the animation preferences. Okay, way over here, this little guy with the gear, being chased by a gear. We're going to start at the top. I'm going to hit on some points just so you can kind of see where some of the stuff is. We're not going to change a whole lot, okay? One thing that you may want to do is turning on or off your mouse wheel scrolling. Okay, sometimes you may not want to zoom in and out with the mouse. That's an option you can turn on or off right there. I don't know what multi-touch gestures are. That might be some new fancy thing. I haven't run across it yet. UI elements, that's fine. Oh, UI elements, I want to point out. These windows here close very easily. It's very easy to accidentally, let me close this real quick, to pop the shelf off and accidentally close it. Okay, so the shelf is gone. You can jump back into there, jump back into your UI elements, and then turn the shelf back on, and then drag it back in position, and then obviously fix the sizing. Yes, you can pull them all off, move everything around wherever you want, and then you can save that format and then use it anytime you go somewhere. Help files are fine, display. Sometimes you may have an issue with materials loading. It all depends on your hardware. So these ones should be fine with the default settings set to parallel. Some computers you may have to kind of play with these settings in order to get your textures to show up. Not too often, but just so you're aware of it. That's fine there, that's fine there. The next one we're going to go to is polygons. Oops, sorry, not polygons. We'll skip that one. Next one we're going to go to is settings. Just so you can see, Maya works with centimeters. You can't read it on the screen, but if you're on yours, it says centimeters. So as you model something, that's what you should keep in mind. Now, in the intro class, we really didn't focus too much on getting things to be measuringly corrective. In this class, we want to be a bit closer to it, okay? So if we were to model this bottle, and I just kind of like arbitrarily model the cylinder, if that cylinder is this big versus the size of this room, my lighting and texturing, or my lighting and shadows and all that are going to calculate differently, okay? So we want to model things as close to about the right proportions as we can, okay? It doesn't have to be perfect, but we just at least want to be in the ballpark, right? So keep in mind we are dealing with centimeters here. Also, if we were to 3D print anything, this head like this, we need to know how big it's supposed to be in the real world. So we would convert it or measure how big we want it to be in centimeters, and then that's how big we would create this head. You can scale things, but sometimes you need it to be exact. Nothing to worry about here or here. Cameras. Files and projects will be the next one. So I don't think Cinema has a autosave. Am I wrong? Does anyone know? Yeah, I don't think it does. Maya does have an autosave. Maya will crash more than Cinema crashed, guaranteed. Okay? It's just part of the fun. You can set up an autosave right here. You can tell it how often you want to save, and then it will automatically save every 10 minutes. That way, if you are at the end of class, your computer crashes, you don't lose 3 hours of work, you only lose 9 minutes worth of work, okay? So if you want to set that up, definitely do. I recommend doing it, okay? Depending on how you set it up. So if you say limit autosaves to 10, then it'll start overwriting the previous ones. Okay, so it'll do 10 and then it'll do that. Now, as you're saving your own, it still saves yours, but then it puts the autosaves in a separate folder. Okay? There's also an increment and save. Typically that's what I use. I'll just say file, increment, and save, and it just increments it. I don't like to have this on. I'm fine redoing my work. You do want to hit ignore version or make sure that that's on. If for some reason you did want to go from Maya 2018 to 17, this ignore version here allows you to do that. If there's a feature that's only in one software versus the other, you can't do it. But if not, then you can use that. This is kind of like a silly thing. It's like when you save After Effects, it doesn't let you go back a version or two versions. You have to save it specifically as the previous version, then go in that one and save it as a previous version. This one just says ignore what version it is, just save it as raw data. There's typically always a way to kind of go and get it back a different way if it's just models. It's when you get into animation and stuff, it becomes different. Another thing laptop people may have an issue with is when you do open up like the file browser, you go to File Save, nothing pops up or Maya crashes. You would go here and set this to OS negative or native, and that would fix it. My laptop at one point, I had to do that. Otherwise, it would crash every time I went to save. Okay? No, the My default one is better. Only if you have it crashing, yeah. And you'll see, like, it's usually like the first search result is, yep, this is what you got to do. Right. Well, it's usually you would notice it because the second you hit Control S to save, it would just it would open the window and just crash. So nothing fancy here. Nothing fancy here. Sound time slider. Go to your time slider, and where it says playback speed, notice where it says 24 frames per second. Okay. So all of our stuff is set to 24 frames a second. We want this to be actually at 30 frames per second. So at the very top where it says frame rate, we'll change that to 30 frames per second. And then we'll change our start time to 1 for the animation and the playback. Now that setting, every time you make a new project, you have to go back into the settings and set it to 30 frames a second and then do that. It doesn't matter too much for this class because we're basically doing modeling. Any animation we do would basically be just like a turntable type thing or a sweeping camera. So even if we had this set to 10 frames a second, we knew exactly how many frames we wanted out of this. When we go into After Effects, we can set it to 30 and it would still be 30. Okay. Because it's stupid. Maya likes to scare you, so you will get errors on the bottom. This red thing will pop up. Sometimes it means something. Sometimes it doesn't mean anything. So yeah. Leave that alone. Go to your undo area. For all of your undos, Maya has a finite number, so you can set this to 50. That way you have 50 undos. Or you can set it to infinite, meaning you have infinite undos. The issue here is that everything is an undo. Selecting an item, deselecting an item, that's 2 undos. Okay? So if you are someone who is constantly like going back and redoing something or undoing something, you may want to set this to 200 or 300, but definitely don't set it to infinite because it literally would go back to the start of class, and if you tried to do that, Maya would probably crash. Okay? It just doesn't like to go back that far. So I keep mine at 50. Typically 50 is fine for me. At most 200 or 300 if you are so inclined to do that. Okay. One area that sometimes, and I've never really figured out how it just magically gets turned off. I'm sure it's a key. Sometimes the undo cue will be turned off. I have no idea why that's even an option. Like who's living that dangerously? But some people turn it off, or somehow it gets turned off. So that's where you turn it back on. Here's GPU information in case you need to know that. And that's it. Okay, so let's hit save. So that saves our animation preferences. So you can see one more area here that I think is important. Go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and Marking Menu Editor. Okay, so the hot box that popped up when we held the space bar down here, this thing, this is a marking menu. That's what they call it. This marking menu editor is a way for us to edit or create our own marking menus. Okay, and just so you can see, this is the hot box, the main one. If I were to go to the right side of this or the east, there's one marking menu. If I go to the west side, if I go to the north, if I go to the south, each one of those gives me a different marking menu that pops up. So I can create my own marking menu if I wanted to. If there's constantly things that pop up that I'm like, I'm constantly going to this menu or this one or this one, I can make my own. We're not going to do that for this one, but you definitely could. Okay. Also, I'm going to point out under Window Settings Preferences Hotkey Editor. It's loading. There we go. These are all the hotkeys inside Maya. So if you go to New Scene, there's the hotkey. Open Scene, there's the hotkey. You can change, customize, whatever you want to do for each one of these. If there's something like here's Maya's increment and save, Control-Alt-S. It also displays it here, Control-Alt-S. I may want to make my own. Here, save scene as, I don't want that option, let me see. Save preferences, okay. You don't have to do this, but I just want you to see it. If I want to make a hotkey for save preferences, I would just click in the box, hit Control-K, let's say. Maya would let me know. Maybe that's not anything. There it is. Control-K isn't anything. If I hit Control-D, which I know is something, it says Control-D is already assigned to this. Do you want to override it? And I wouldn't want to override that, okay? So it will let you know that's already assigned so you don't override something, and then you can find something else. You can even do like, I'm holding down Control-Shift-Alt-K, and that is a hotkey that I could assign to something, right? I don't need to assign that. I will not assign anything to that. Anything you need to know for hotkeys, you could drop it inside here. Even if you have a script, a collection of scripts, a collection of actions, you can assign a hotkey to that. So every time you hit Control-Alt-Shift-K, it runs whatever action you want it to run. All right, close that. All right, so I'm going to go to Save Preferences again. So now my preferences get saved again. Cool. All right, so if you have an object there, delete the object. We're going to talk about modeling stuff. So model a cube, or just create a cube. So I told you our first assignment was going to be a weapon. I'm going to start off modeling the handle of a weapon, okay? And I want you to see the reasons I'm approaching it one way, and then we'll do this as a class together, right? So if I look at the what a weapon handle looks like, sword handle. Obviously, there's a million different styles. I'm going to go with something like that. No, not the chain. Well, just ignore the chain on there. Just pretend it's like wood or metal or leather or something. So it looks already, what kind of shape do you think that would be a good starting point with? Rectangle, right? Some people might use a cylinder to start off with that because it's kind of rounded. Anytime you model anything, you have to worry about quads, okay? We don't want to have any triangles anywhere in our scene as much as we can. Other softwares don't like it. It'll cause issues when you start smoothing things out. So if I were to start this with a cylinder, right at the top of that, there's a triangle, okay? So most of the stuff I model, I start off with that. I start off with a cube because it's a lot easier to tweak that and get no quads or get no triangles. So anytime I model something, I'm looking at first proportions. Looking at that, I'm trying to see how big that hand grip would be, right? It definitely wouldn't be something like that. That wouldn't make sense for a sword. So something like that seems more appropriate. Okay? Obviously, I can tweak it after. Eventually, this will be smoothed out so that it will be nice and round. If I were to hit 3, that's your smooth preview. Okay, so like in Cinema, there is a hotkey for it, but I can never remember it. You could hit a smooth on there and then just toggle the smooth on and off. So 1 in Maya goes to rough mode, 3 goes to smooth mode. That's not going to give me what I want. So what I need to do is I need to add divisions to this so that it kind of holds the shape of that block better, but still allows it to round off, okay? So here's one of the cool hotkeys in Maya, and it's not on your sheet because I want you to write this one down. Shift, right click, and hold. And this was actually added 2 versions ago, or maybe it was just I realized it was there 2 versions ago. Shift and then right click and hold. Whatever object I have selected, Maya will recognize that object and then give me a list of all the things I can do to that object. So right now, I could sculpt it, I can fill holes, I can append, I can extrude, I can smooth, I can booleans, blah, 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 all these things. These are also under this mesh and edit mesh menu. So these 2 menus up here, they also reside there. But shift right clicking right on the object, it's a lot easier to get to. This is a custom marking menu that you could create, okay, or you could modify. Once you get very comfortable with this, you'll see like some of the pros where they just do that. And I just got to the menu item that I need to get to, okay? You're just very quick able to get, not that, I don't know what I did there. There we go, okay? So I'm going to go to this menu. Now in Cinema, what tool would you use if you wanted to add divisions? If I wanted to add an edge going around it, knife, was that one? Right? So in Maya, we'll use insert edge loop, okay? This is, allows you to click and drag and create edges just like that. Okay, so by putting these edges here, some edges here, oops, not there, and then hitting 3 here, what I hit? 3, there we go. You can see I can get something that is rounded, but also kind of flat and blocky, right? And that's kind of what I was going after. I still want this to maybe be a little bit more rounded. I may want to grab these and maybe pull that up some. Looks a little bit better. Maybe I'll add another division. Dang it, I did it again. Here, and maybe pull that out some there. There you go. So that's better. That feels more like maybe that could be a handle, closer to that than we had obviously with the other one. Now this also gives me quads everywhere. Okay, like I said, we want quads over everything we model. So there's no triangles here. When we use this edge loop goes all the way around the object. It does that because everything is a quad. If I have any triangles, it doesn't work. So if I went to my cylinder, I rotated that, I'm going to lower the divisions in it. Kind of proportion this a bit like that, Okay, there we go. So if I went to the edge loop and I tried to do any edge loops, see how it stops right there. It's going from a quad to a triangle and it says, nope, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to figure out where you want me to go. So it doesn't. Now if I took this and delete those, and I took this and delete those, and then I just did that a little bit. Oops. You'll see that I can actually get this shape to not have any triangles at all. And get those to be pretty close to about the same shape. I think this one probably just needs another division here, another division there. Okay, so pretty close, not exact, but pretty close. Okay, so we're going to build this shape initially And then you can see, obviously, how to use a tool, how I'm bouncing around. All right, so create a cube if you haven't created a cube yet. And then just scale it so that it has that same kind of proportion to a handle. You don't need to focus on what my exact proportions are. Learn to find what your eye is telling you looks like a handle, or looks like, the right proportions for that. Good? Okay. Now, what I need to do is I need to add some divisions in here. The way that I look at the shapes to figure out where I need divisions is I know what this is going to look like when I hit 3. It's going to look like a squished out sphere. That's what it looks like. Okay, so you can hit 3 and 1, 3 to get it smooth, 1 to get it back, just so you can see what that looks like. The more you do this kind of modeling and the more you kind of like visualize what's going to happen, the easier it's going to be for you to see exactly where you need divisions to happen. Okay? So when I hit 3 on here and I see how rounded this is becoming, I know already that some spots I'm going to have to definitely add a lot of divisions to, or some divisions to square it off. Okay? So if this is a handle, I know that this side and that side should be pretty blocky. They should be like pretty square. So I'm going to hold down Shift and right click and go to the Insert Edgeloop tool. Okay. Now you click and drag the opposite direction that you think you would click and drag. Okay. Like most people would drag here to get it, you would drag along this to make it go that way. Okay. So I'm just dragging along that edge and I'm going to bring it pretty close to that edge. Not right on top of it, but pretty close. So just to take a quick detour just so you can see this, there's polygon primitives, NURBS primitives, and volume primitives. Okay, you would never mistake a volume primitive for anything but a volume, so don't worry about that. The NURBS primitives, though, are just calculated a bit different. Instead of this being a solid cube, these are parts of a cube. Okay, if you dealt with anything that was like CAD data or math data of a car, typically those are made in NURBS and then converted to polys and then brought in. Okay, we're not going to use any NURBS for anything right now, at least. Cool. So we got that. So now if we were to hit 3, you can see how that shape changed tremendously. Instead of getting that blobby, flat, squished out sphere, now we have something that looks like, a cylinder that has some substance to it. I'm going to hit 1 again to get back. I'm going to go back to my Insert Edgeloop tool if I was out of it. And I'm going to add a division right here in the center of this. Okay, so this is going along, the side of it. Now I may want to get this pretty well locked in so that's exactly halfway. Okay, so over here in the channel box, all the stuff that I've done to it, here's the cube, here's one split, and then here's the last split I did. If I click on that, if I hit W first, which is the move tool, then click on that, there's a weight right there. And that weight is how far it is from one edge to the other. Okay? If you click on you have the item selected, you scroll down in the channel box, and you go to the poly split ring, the top one. Yours may not say 8, yours may say 3. Okay? Make sure you clicked on the move tool and then click on that poly split ring. And then you can change the weight to 0.5. imagine 0, 1, that's our two extremes. 0.5 is just right in the middle, okay? There are ways to get us to click and get exactly in the center, but then we have to go to options and then we have to like undo stuff. So it's easiest just to do that. Yeah, so that's looking pretty good, right? Yeah, I think it actually looks really good like that. I don't think I need those extra divisions at all. Cool. All right, now to get out of that, you're going to right click and hold on your object and then go to object mode. Okay? So in Cinema, on the left side of the screen, there was model mode and then there was points and faces and edges. In Maya, it's right clicking and holding and just going to whatever one you want to get to. Okay? Maya also uses color as a way for us to see what it is that we're in, like what mode. The object is green, you can see the outlines around it. When I'm in something like face mode, it turns to like a blue. When I click on something, this is like a tan, and then we have the blue there. If I'm in vertex, which are the points, these are purple. Okay, and then yellow when they get selected. Okay, so pay attention to colors. If you see something as blue and you're trying to grab the whole object, it's not going to work, right? Cool, so I think that's pretty good for a handle. I don't think I need to tweak that at all. All right. Cool. Let's see what other parts we got here. So let's build, obviously not this decorative one, but let's build something like that on top of it, okay? So we could, we're not going to do this. I could grab these two faces, extrude them out. Whoopsie, there we go. And then pull everything out of here. And that would give me, you know, everything as one piece. If I'm doing something for a video game where I want everything to be one piece, it's much easier to manage, sure. But we're going to build this as separate pieces. There we go. So we're going to build another cube, polygon cube. We're going to slide it to the end of it, and then we're going to tweak the shape. So just kind of figure out how big you want that to be. Now, as you're modeling stuff, you really want to try your best to keep everything around the origin, okay? So as you model this hilt, we didn't pick it up and move it like in the middle of space and then try to model everything there. Your job is a lot easier if everything is right on that bottom grid plane aligned with the X and Z lines, okay? So you can see if I delete that, when I created this next cube, it's simply a matter of me sliding it over and then just adjusting some of the scale parameters to get it in position. If this was, let's say, way over here, anytime I create something, I have to move it over, move it up, and then it's very difficult to find like where the center of this is. Okay, so it's always best to keep your stuff right there at the origin if you can. That way as you're modeling, everything is nicely situated. If we have to, we can split stuff down the middle, delete half of it, and then mirror it over. It's a lot easier if it's right there at the origin as well. Okay, so now we have another piece here. This one, I don't know what it looks like from the side, maybe like this, where it's kind of like hammered like that. So we could definitely do something like that. Looking at this here, I guess that's the best one for that. This shape is flat, this shape is thick, this shape is thick, this shape is flat. So if I'm looking at that from the side view, it goes like this, and then imagine that it goes off like that. Okay, so we need a division here, we need a division there, we need probably a division here and a division there. Okay, so every time we have an extreme of the shape, we need a division at that point. Okay, so we don't want to have too many divisions on there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a division here and a division here, and then the same thing on the other side. Okay. Oops, I accidentally extruded. There we go. Now I can do that by just using my subdivisions. Not that one, this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, one more. That's right. Okay, so that works. I did 5 subdivisions, which gives me 4 lines. Okay, now this popped up here because I was in this menu. If not, I go down to the polycube, go to subdivisions depth, and then it would pop up. So what we're going to do is we need to squish the ends of it. It doesn't matter how you do it, they just have to be squished, and they obviously should be even. So the way that I'm going to do these is, I'll show you a couple ways. I could take the faces for this and then just push them in. And that definitely squishes them. I could also grab the edges. Like I may want to squish these like this, then grab the next 2 pairs, and then squish those some, and then keep those out. Okay? You could also obviously grab the points. You're just going to have a lot more points to click. Okay? So squish yours so that you have some kind of taper to it. The reason we would choose points, vertices, or points, edges, or faces, it really depends on what we're selecting and what we're trying to move. If we grab a face, that's 4 points, right? Or it's 2 edges. If we grab an edge, it's 2 points. If we grab a vertice, it's 1 point, right? So the bigger you go, the more things you're just selecting, okay? So faces, obviously you're grabbing all 4 of these edges and all 4 of the points. With vertices, you can isolate it to just 2 points or even just 1 point if you wanted to. All right, now it's going to get pretty old having to constantly go left and right and constantly select both sides all the time. Maya does have a pretty good symmetry tool, so we should use the symmetry tool. So I'm going to hold down W. I'm going to hold down the left mouse button. A brand new hotbox or marking menu pops up. I'm going to go to Symmetry and Symmetry. Okay? That's like a nested one. It's really tricky to get to. Hold down W, hold down the left mouse. I go to Symmetry and then Symmetry. And that turns it on. Now this may not work for me. We will see. Okay, so I grab this point and no symmetry is happening. I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to go back to my symmetry options, and if you look at it, my symmetry is set to x-axis. So if I look at my view, the x direction is going this way, and I know that because this little xyz is going that way. So if I were to model something rotated, the other direction, this would work. But I actually need this to be in the Z direction so that both sides move. So I'm just going to go back to my symmetry, turn X off, and turn Z on. So now when I grab these points and move them, you can see how they move symmetrically. Maybe. I mean, I think you can. It's just not going to do anything because there's nothing over there. Nope, it broke. Nope, it will not let you. I thought it might. Now the reason I want to do that is because maybe I want to take these points and rotate them backwards and then move them back. That would be very difficult to do if I had both of those points selected without symmetry, because what would happen is Maya would basically like rotate one point forward, the other points backwards. And that's pretty thick. I gotta thin this thing out.
So you can only do symmetry if both faces are selected, right?
Well, no, you just have to make sure it's going the correct direction. So I had to change mine from X to Z. Yeah. So if you grab the one side, then the other side should automatically select and move. So let me show this real quick. This is an issue he's having with his. And something that you need to be at least aware of that is can cause problems, okay? So I move this cube over here. If I resize it with the scale tools like this, the object's green, everything's cool, there's no issue, okay? All my stuff should still work. So if I go to faces and grab this and make sure symmetry's on, it grabs both sides, and obviously I could tweak both sides. On his, I believe he grabbed this and was grabbing the faces. Yep. And what happens here is that now the geometry doesn't know, like, even though it's obvious to us where it is, it doesn't know actually like where the points are. And so we basically have to like redo how the geometry is doing the symmetry in order for it to work, okay? And then what also he tried to do after that is add divisions. Maya remembers you moved face number 4 so far, face number 5 so far. When we start adding subdivisions after this, it changes all that stuff. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. So as I start to do that, you can see how it just goes crazy. Because it's trying to update, you moved face 4 here, face 5 there. And just so you can see this, if I grab all the points and I click here, you can see there's the actual XYZ position for each one of those points. Okay, so Maya does like save all that information. Okay, so we have this. It's, oops, I turned my symmetry off. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is you'll see also that the symmetry allows us to actually do other stuff. So we can extrude, we can bevel, we can insert edge loops. All of those things still work when we have symmetry on, okay? So I'm going to grab this piece here, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit first. I think it might look kind of neat if it's scaled down some. And then I'm going to extrude it. You can do an extrude multiple ways. One way we hold shift and we just drag it out. It's an option you can do. I typically prefer to hit Control E. That gives you this manipulator, and that manipulator is a lot easier to work with to extrude stuff than the other way. Okay, so I'm going to extrude that just a little bit. Control E, that's what I use to extrude stuff. I pulled it out a little bit. Notice how that box popped up on the side too. So Maya also has these little pop-ups that show up. Does Cinema have that? I don't think it does. It just makes you go on the side. Yeah. So here's where you can adjust the settings. So if you notice one of the numbers that's been changed, which is like local translate Z, I can click on that and drag it further if I wanted maybe more refinement, or if I'm having trouble kind of moving it into position. Or obviously you could type in what that number is. Okay. So I extruded it just a little bit. Then I'm going to grab the face that will be facing like the sword itself, and I'm going to extrude that some. And yeah, that's good. And maybe I'll give it a little bit of an offset, like 0.075. Oops, that's too far. Used to. You'll see here I made just another quick one. It doesn't hurt to do multiple iterations. Sometimes you want to see, you know, maybe if I made it a different way, maybe it would look better. You're good. Okay, so don't be afraid to change things up. And also, as I'm hitting 3, I'm kind of looking at this to see what parts do I like that are smooth. Do I want this to be blockier? That kind of stuff. I think in here, I do want this to be kind of like really smooth overall, but I want the top part here to be nice and crisp, like this edge going around like that. I want that area to be crisper, but I want the whole thing to be smooth overall, okay? So what I can do is I'm going to go to my edge mode. So I just right click right on it and go to edge. And I'm just going to double click and then shift double click all of the hard edges going around. Okay, so anywhere I see where there's like basically a corner, I want to grab that edge. Okay, and again, our speed on this goes a little bit quicker because we have symmetry on, so it should be grabbing both sides of that at the same time. I didn't say anything yet. All right, so once you have them selected, you're going to shift right click, and we're going to go to bevel edge. And then you should get something that looks like this, where it's added this extra division kind of going around it. And then if I just go back to object mode, by right clicking, I hit 3 on it, I should get, you know, the result I was kind of hoping for. All right, so a couple things to pay attention to as you're going. Okay, if I grab this face here, let's say that I extrude this, so I hit Control E, but I never move it. And then I hit Control E again, and Control E again, and Control E again. Every time I've done an extrusion, it's actually extruded it and just kept it in the same spot. Let's say I then move it. At this point, it doesn't look like anything is different than if I were to have just done one extrusion. When I hit 3 though, you'll see that magically I get extra edges. Okay, if I look here, there's one edge. When I hit 3, suddenly there's 3 edges there. So something has gone wrong. I don't know what it is. If I go to my channel box and I scroll down, let me deselect. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 extrudes here. So if I knew I'm only supposed to do 1 extrude, but all of a sudden there's 4, then something has gone wrong. Okay? So the easiest way to do that is to hit undo until you realize, whoops, I wasn't supposed to do that. There we go. And then I would go back to the faces, extrude, pull it out, and then now it's nice and neat. Okay? In the event that that doesn't happen, we'll get to ways that we can kind of correct that, but that's the way you want to approach it. Okay? I'm going to scoot this forward a little bit. I'm going to just reset this back to where it was. Okay. So I reset this back to where it was without any bevels on it. This is with bevels, this is without bevels. Another thing that I could have done instead of adding a bevel is I could have added an edge loop. So if I had just gone here and dropped in an edge loop right there, that would have given me a slightly different result, and I may have found that, maybe a little bit more appealing, like how this is rounding right here. I may have said, yeah, that looks cool, I want to keep that. You're not going to know all the methods and all the things that are going to look good ever. It's just a matter of kind of exploring to see what the tools are going to do. What happens when I use a bevel? What happens when I use an insert edge loop? What happens when I use a combination of both? What would have happened if I would have also edge looped this? You can see, I'll save it so we have a copy. Bevel that. I'll keep it really tight. Maybe I'll add 2 segments here. And now I get more of this like notched area, right? And again, that might be something that I'm after. I may want to have that notched. That's how you do it, okay? The biggest thing is you are going to use essentially 3 main tools every time you model stuff. You will use bevel. Pretty much every time I model something, I use bevel. You will use extrude, which is right there, extrude. And then you will also use the insert edge loop or multi-cut. Insert edge loop or multi-cut. They're essentially the same thing. They do, somewhat the same thing. Okay? Those 3 tools above everything else is what you're going to need. All right. So I'm going to just hide these other ones. Okay. So we have a handle for our sword. I have this. I need to create some sort of actual blade. So I'm going to start off with a cube, just like before. And I'm just going to kind of shape it to how big that blade would be. Okay, so I modeled it to about the same proportions, and then if you were to just look at this, you can kind of see the direction I took that. I had to take symmetry off because it's no longer a symmetrical object. And I just added some divisions here and gave it some shape into where I thought the major shape changes were on this blade. So if you've ever looked at a blade, you can kind of see, sword. It's kind of like the foam sword. Okay, so the one side is pretty blocky. There's this kind of shelf on it, and then it like tapers down. Okay, so I added a division right here in the middle and right here. That's where that taper is going to start. Okay, so it starts tapering here. There's one area there, and then this area got shrunk down. And then I added one on each end just to make sure that that held. If those weren't there, it would do that. Okay, so just so you can see this, so there's my sword. I know that I'm going to have this little shelf area here. I'm flattening this. I'm flattening that, maybe tucking that in a little bit. And then to get this shape, it's simply a matter of just pushing that edge, pushing this edge, maybe just tweaking that one a little bit. So that gives me a nice angle here. And then edge loop and edge loop. Okay, so I'm going to leave my wireframe selected. Try to get that shape with your sword. All right, so we deleted this face. Click the little blue square. Right-clicking with a face. And then you just grab, not these faces, but the ones that were there, and then you just hit backspace or delete. Now what you'll see too is, look at the how this basically this edge comes right to here. Okay, the reason we added this edge was because when we hit 3, it was like pulling back and it was like rounding off. Because we deleted that edge, or the faces at the end, I can delete that edge and it still works. Okay, so now we have less edges in there, which is obviously always a good thing. Anytime we delete edges, don't just hit regular delete. Okay, regular delete, you'll see, does not delete the points. So this edge looks like it's broken. If I go to the vertices, they're still there. So anytime you delete an edge, you want to hold control and then delete. Okay, so not only can you delete the faces that are on the inside of this, you can also delete that edge that's right there. Just make sure you select the edge and then hit control delete. Fix the proportions of that handle some. So we've been working on this roughly an hour-ish. We haven't saved a thing. This thing could crash at any minute and we would lose all of it. Well, I haven't saved it. So we should save this. Now, I told you before that Maya will automatically create all of these folders for us. So we want to tell Maya to do that. So we're going to go up to File and go to Project Window. This is where Maya is going to create all of our stuff. Right now, we're working in the default project, so my stuff is being saved to C:, blah, blah, blah projects. We're going to hit New. So New on that far right side. You're going to call it your last name underscore, and we'll just say weapon. For the location, you want to pick your folder that's on the P drive. Sarcona weapon on the P drive, blah, 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 okay? So you can see what these things are. We have scenes. That's where Maya is going to automatically save any of our actual Maya files. Those are called scenes. Templates, ignore. Anything we render out of Maya will automatically go inside images. In Cinema, you'd have to specify, go into this specific folder. Maya automatically drops everything right inside there. Source images is for anything that we're bringing into Maya, so any pictures, textures, that kind of thing, you'll put inside source images. The rest of it you can ignore. Well, there's your autosave, so in case you need that. All right, so now hit accept, and then hit Control S. And then you can call it your last name underscore weapon underscore 001. Always name everything in this class with your last name. That way, in case you need to, you can always find that file again. Cool. Okay, once you have your project created, once you have your stuff saved, close your Maya. We're going to be done working for today. And I'm going to show you in the P drive. Where's my P drive first? There it is. In 2520, in Sarcona weapon 001. All right. For whatever reason, didn't put it inside that folder, so I'm just going to cut it and then put it inside my scenes. Should have done that. It automatically created all of these folders. So assets, autosave, cache, clips, data, images. So it automatically generates these. If for some reason you deleted something like images, when Maya needs it, it'll just create that images folder again. Okay. But anytime you rendered something out, that's where it's going to go. Same thing with your source images. If you were to delete it when you open Maya, it'll put it back in. Okay, so this P drive folder with your name, 2520 F18, you want to back that up to your hard drive. Okay. Also, in the P drive, you have that Maya folder. Inside the Maya folder is a 2018 folder. You want to also back that 2018 folder up. Those are your preferences. So your shelf that we created, that is going to be saved right to, that is going to be able to update every time you come in. Okay? So every time you come into class, you'll recopy that 2018 folder. Every time you leave class, you'll put it back on your drive. Okay? So make sure you're keeping a live version of that. So every time you come in, you're working with the correct one. And then just so you can see it, preferences, shelves. In my shelf folder, you can see, because I renamed it Sarcona 2520, I have a shelf mel script. It's hard to see because it's blurry. But I have a shelf mel script that's called Sarcona 2520. Is that better? Yes. And what's cool about Maya is that everything, like these are .mel files, that's basically just like a Maya script file. If I open this with Notepad, in plain English / coding, you can actually see what's inside here. Here's a shelf button, here's what the button does, here's a command, here's what the text is, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So back up your 2018 folder, back up your 2520 folder, and then once you're done, you can save your stuff and go.